induct in. So as soon as we do this, it's now 9:07. I'm J.D. Solomon. I'm chairman of the Environmental Management Commission, and we will do the induction first. Then I will turn the committee meeting over to Chair Weiss and the other chairs for the rest of the day. So this time, Jared Wright, if you'll come forward.
Everyone's reporting. I'm Elaine Marshall, Secretary of State. It is my honor to be here today to administer the solemn oath of duty for your commissioner. I look at it as a covenant, a promise. You'll see from the wording, it actually is. And it's the same oath that the rest of these members have subscribed to, have sworn to. And as citizens, I believe it's our duty to respect this oath, not to try to ask things that are not within their powers, but also to be there to make sure that they faithfully abide by their oath also. I believe that's a citizen duty for all of us in a world where we are the governed and they are the governing. So it's my honor to hand you that. And if you will please raise your right hand, I will administer the oath. Do you, Jared C. Wright, solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States? And do you, Jared C. Wright, solemnly swear or affirm that you will faithfully and bear true allegiance to the state of North Carolina and to the constitutional powers which are or may be established for the government thereof? And will you endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution of the state, not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States? And do you, Jared C. Wright, solemnly swear or affirm that you will well and truly execute the duties of your office as a member of the North Carolina Environmental Management Commission according to the best of your skill and ability, according to law? So help you God. If so, say I do.
I do.
Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Before we congratulate or get a few pictures with Jared, I'd like to thank Secretary Marshall too. She always comes over. You've seemed like you always make the time out of your day, and it's most appreciated. So thank you.
The job's done, so the paperwork's done.
You get a couple pictures.
You will get one and they get one.
Let's get a picture.
Yeah. Did you say one of these is mine?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you, Secretary.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to?
Maybe that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, one other point of duty. Council has the ethics letter to read. Thank you, Secretary Marshall, very much for coming over today. Thank you. Okay, Ellie.
Thank you. The State Ethics Commission has done an ethics evaluation for Commissioner Wright. They did not find an actual conflict of interest, but found the potential for a conflict of interest. The potential conflict of interest does not prohibit his service on the Environmental Management Commission. Mr. Wright fills the role of a public member on the commission. He is a senior project manager with McGill Associates, a company that offers engineering and consulting services, including land planning and recreation, water and wastewater resources, and environmental services. Therefore, Mr. Wright has the potential for a conflict of interest and should exercise appropriate caution in the performance of his public duties should issues involving McGill Associates or its clients come before the commission for official action.
Welcome. And I'll just say words. Jared has been in private practice, but also with the city of Lenoir in a couple different roles, including Public Works Director. So I'm excited about both his technical background and his ability to represent and speak for local government. It's an important part of what we do. So glad to have you, Jared. If you want to say a few words, you don't have to. Officially, I will say at this point, you are going to be named to the two committees that Chris Duggan was on, the standing committee. So Lois has made that a changement, which would be the Water Allocation Committee first off. So anything you want to say, Jared, before we get rolling?
Just want to thank all the members that I've met this morning for the warm welcome. I'm excited to participate on the commission and these committees. I'm excited about the work that we do, and I'm passionate about environmental management and our mission. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm Jill Weiss. I'm the chairman of the Water Allocation Committee, and I want to welcome Commissioner Wright. Very glad to have you. And okay, what's going on? I've not been able. I'm gonna wait.
Needs to mute the Zoom.
Yes, somebody's got,
See, Brian Hilbrunner is not muted, whoever that is.
that's me. Back here at the back.
That's our IT staff, by the way.
Darth Vader.
Try now.
Water Allocation Committee being called to order. Again, I'm Jill Weiss, chairman of this committee, and we've just welcomed a new member, Jared Wright. The first thing that I need to do is confirm that no one has any conflict of interest or appearance of conflict pursuant to the State Ethics Act at General Statute 138A. Okay, seeing none, we will move to approval of last month's minutes. And if I'm hesitating, it's because I have not been able to log in to the website. So I'm not flying blind, but I don't have my eyes on exactly what you might be seeing. But anyway, let me ask, has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from last meeting? Are there any corrections or concerns that we need to address? Okay, seeing none, I would ask for a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Is there a second? Commissioner Carter seconds. Thank you. And now we'll vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That's unanimous. So the minutes stand approved. The information item for today is our IBT update, which we are trying to provide at every commission meeting. And it looks like we have Linwood Peel presenting today. Nice to see you, Mr. Peel. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Weiss and Commission members. Good morning. My name is Linwood Peel again, and I'm with the Water Supply Planning section. And I'm here today to give you a brief update on interbasin transfers that's currently going through our IBT process. I'm trying to move forward with we all.
Thank you, Director
Seems to be
Rogers.
particularly challenging this
support.
morning, apparently.
Well, I'm a little IT lacking today.
And I apologize, we're working through some technical difficulties this morning.
See. If all the commissioner members have a presentation, I can do it from here without moving the slides. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, but we're sharing the screen with. I think once we share the screen, it stops allowing me to do that.
Here we go. Go back to. Thank you, David. Again, good morning. My name is Linwood Peel with the Water Planning Section. I'm here to give a brief update on the interbasin transfer across the request that's going through the process. I'm going to talk about the three that's currently in progress. The town of Mooresville, Charlotte Water IBT modification request, and the town of Fuquay Marina, and briefly just mention the two IBT bills that has recently been ratified. The latest request is from the town of Mooresville to transfer water from the Catawba River Basin to the Rocky and the Yadkin River Basin. They currently have a pre-existing allowance of 8 MGD, and they're requesting in their scoping and notice of intent 12.6 million gallons a day. But I want to make note that this is a preliminary number, and it can change through the process once they begin their purpose and need and their environmental document itself. And currently, the notice of intent was earlier, and they're in the second stage, which is the beginning process of the draft EIS. And recently, they submitted to the Division of Water Resources their scoping document. We reviewed it, made some comments, and they submitted it to the clearinghouse for scoping and the process for their IBT. Next is Charlotte Water. Interbasin transfer modification requests. Charlotte currently has a 33 million gallons a day certificate. And in this request, it's a preliminary potential number of additional 30 MGD requests. And of course, this is a preliminary number, and that can be changed through the process once they complete their purpose and need and their environmental assessment. And this is the modification they're using in 143.215.22L. They're using their section V, which is the modification process, and they're in the second stage there. And I would like to show you their updated modification preliminary. It's very preliminary schedule. Of course, this spring they submit their notice of intent. And then there had 7 different public meetings, both in North Carolina and South Carolina. And they started a stakeholders engagement process, but they currently put it on hold because the Catawba Water Management Group is working on their modeling for the entire basin, both in North and South Carolina. And also they're going to develop a water resources plan, and Charlotte will be using that in their analysis of their environmental assessment. And as you can see, they have preliminary or potential dates or estimated dates of when they'll have a draft EIS, which is approximately 2 years from now, mid-2017. And in late 17, they hope they can have a draft EIS ready for adequacy public hearing review, and then coming to the early 2008, going to the EMC, with that. And then by mid 2028 and maybe even early 2029 have the final EMC determination on the modification. At the first bullet, I've already mentioned that they put their pause or hold on the stakeholders group because they want to Catawba Water Read to finish their process first, the modeling and everything in their plan first. But the second bullet just indicates that anyone, the public stakeholders, can watch along as they do their stakeholders process. And they're also recorded and put on the next page, their website that they have there. They have everything from notice intent to all their meetings, and any public comments on that website as well that you can go and view, the public can view. And of course, DEQ, the Division of Water Resources, have a website with all the interbasin transfers that's in process. The last one I'm going to speak on is the Fuquay Marina. They're the furthest along in the process. They're actually at stage 2. They're requesting a little bit over 6 MGD from the Cape Fear to the Neuse River Basin. And they're in the second stage of there, and they're the furthest along in the process. And as I mentioned, they actually apparently finished their draft EIS with a couple of iterations, maybe even several iterations of their draft environmental document, environmental impact statement. So they're final, and we're working with them to get everything in place before we come to the ask the EMC for a hearing officer and move on with public hearing and the process. Once we work with them and get everything in place, we issue dates and stuff for public hearings and so forth. And last, I would like to just mention two bills that has been ratified related to the Interbasin Transfer Program. First is House Bill 694. It combines the Hall River and the Deep River into the Cape Fear River Basin. In other words, instead of having three different subbasins, now you have one subbasin. It's called the Cape Fear River. And it also combines the Contentment Creek into the Neuse River Basin. So instead of having three in the Neuse, now you have two in the Neuse. Next, House Bill 850. A different bill that has been ratified. It directs the North Carolina Collaboratory to study the current statutory process for approval of surface water transfers and provides, recommendation for legislation. It also placed a moratorium on issuance of the EMC issuing IBTs for any new or increased transfers greater than 15 million gallons per day. And the moratorium ends March 1st, 2027. With that brief update, if you have any questions, I'm here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Peel. I do have a question about House Bill 850. I understand it's been ratified. Is it currently on the governor's desk, or has it been? Thank you, Director Rogers.
I think they've both been signed, I believe. 850 may not have been signed. 694 has been signed by the governor, so it is law. And I think 850 is due to be considered here in the next few days. I'll get the details on that and report back because there's a time frame that the governor needs to get those signed or they become law. So 10 days, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
So one
Yes,
question
Commissioner Smith.
and maybe comment. I guess the comment is the moratorium, practically speaking, only affects the Charlotte IBT application at this point, correct?
It appears.
And I guess another comment, I think it's nice that the General Assembly thought it would even be possible to get through the IBT process by March 2027. But I guess you can't be too careful.
I don't think they will be, but that's correct.
And one question, so the Catawba Watery Working Group, so I assume they'll be looking at both of the potential IBTs that affect the Catawba River Basin, right?
Absolutely.
So that's good. So we'll have the information that looks at the cumulative effects of those two pending requests.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Further questions for Mr. Peel? All right, seeing none, thank you again for the presentation. At this time, I would just confirm whether Director Rogers has any further comments at this time.
No comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. I just want to again thank Mr. Peel and his staff for the presentation, the preparation of the slides, and final nod to Commissioner Wright in welcoming him. And at this point, I will adjourn the meeting.
Good. Good morning. My name is Charlie Carter. I am the chair of the Air Quality Committee. We're starting here just a couple minutes late. We had to do some transition. First thing I want to do is welcome our new member, Jared Wright, who is replacing Chris Duggan on this committee. And we've done a nose count. We do have a quorum, so we can proceed. We even have the chairman back in, so I know we can proceed now. So first order of business, General Statute 138A15 requires me to inquire as to whether any member knows of any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict of interest with respect to any matter before the committee today. Any member knows of a conflict of interest or appearance of a conflict, please so state at this time. Hearing none, we'll go right ahead then. And I had forgotten this, but we have sets of minutes to review and approve today. The first set was from the March 12th, 2025 meeting. Anyone have any changes, corrections, fixes, whatever for that set of minutes? If not, do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
Okay.
Second.
Commissioner Smith moves approval and
Second.
Commissioner Ellison seconds. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And they're approved unanimously. Second, we also have the minutes of the May 7th, 2025 meeting of the committee. Same question. Any corrections, changes, questions about those minutes? If not, I would also entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved, Commissioner Weiss.
Commissioner Weiss moves and a second.
Second.
Commissioner Ellison seconds again. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those minutes are approved unanimously as well.
Mr. Chairman, can
Yes,
I ask
ma'am.
a question about
Commissioner Smith.
just
yeah.
the form of the minutes, which appears to have changed fairly dramatically, not just for these, but
Yeah.
for the commission generally.
No, that's fine.
I'm just curious as to how they're being generated. They almost look like AI products from the transcript, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think they're including probably more detail of the discussion than is absolutely necessary. But I was just curious about how they're being generated at this point, because it's clearly a different process.
I don't know, and I'm going to look at the chairman, and he doesn't seem to be acting like he wants to respond to that question. Do we have anybody that knows the answer to that question? Here we go.
Morning. I know the answer to that. Catherine Quinlan with the Division of Air Quality. WebEx, when it's recording these meetings, does generate a transcript. And so we export that transcript and then review it and clean it up because it doesn't always get all the words exactly correct. It's pretty good, but we do have to do some cleaning up. And then just trying to make sure it reads like it was said and makes sense. So clean up any sort of grammatical errors or spelling errors that the transcript made. But it is from a transcript, and that's my understanding of what change we were supposed to make maybe a few meetings ago for the minutes.
To further answer Commissioner Smith's question, is that, do you know specifically if that's AI involved or generated?
It's just what, I'm not sure, but WebEx generates it. So it's auto-generated from the recording itself. So what the recording picks up as words, it translates that into text, and then we clean it up and add. It also doesn't tell you who made the statement, so we do listen to the recording to add the names as well as who was speaking.
Sure, of
at what
course.
point.
Right, yeah, it wouldn't be identifying the members. Chair Solomon.
So from a consulting perspective, they all claim to be AI at some point. So they're probably all claiming to be AI. but
That's
it's-
what I
it's really
kind of
a word-
figured, but
It's really a word match and then a transcription type thing that happens. I don't want to get into process or comment on the department's processes, except to say that AI could be used to reduce that down to maybe 5 or 10 pages or 3 pages or something like that, to see how it would do that instead of having a human try to reduce down the essential parts. So that capability is there with tools, but again, that's up to how the department wants to process the minutes and do whatever they want. So.
okay. Any further thoughts or questions about The form or process?
No, thank you. That
Okay, no,
answered
I'm,
my
I'm glad,
question.
I'm glad you asked. I had no idea. I did have the same, I guess, something of the same reaction you had, though, that there was perhaps a bit more detail than I thought was entirely necessary, that there's, because the minutes have gotten lengthy in, lately, or really most, for a while now, and I wasn't sure that's really necessary, but, all right, let's proceed to, our, agenda item, action item, excuse me, on the agenda, which is the request for approval of a 30-day, nope, I'm reading the wrong one, for approval to proceed to the EMC for approval to go to public comment hearing on the proposed rules and regulatory impact analysis to incorporate the pre-permitting construction activity provisions of Session Law 2023-134 as amended by Session Law 2024-1, and we're going to recognize Ms. Burleson here in just a second to do the presentation. Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Good morning, committee members. I'm Joelle Burleson with the Division of Air Quality's Planning Section. And I'm just going to give you a brief follow-up to our May meeting on this topic. Okay, on slide 2, you'll find for your reference a series of acronyms that you may hear in the presentation or see in the materials associated with it. And as Chair Carter said, I'm here today to request approval to proceed to the EMC, to request the full EMC's approval to proceed to public comment and hearing on proposed rules and regulatory impact analysis to incorporate the pre-permitting construction activity provisions from Session Law 2023-134, Section 12.11 E through G, as amended by Session Law 2024-1, Section 4.13. And for a brief recap, at the May meeting, the Division of Air Quality presented these rules to you to incorporate provisions of the session law and the accompanying regulatory impact analysis that was approved by OSBM, or the Office of State Budget and Management, on April 27th, 2025, to proceed to the EMC to request to proceed to public comment and hearing. The package includes one new rule, 15A NCAC 02Q0114, activities allowed prior to permit issuance, proposed for adoption. 15A NCAC 02Q0501 and 0507 are existing rules where we're amending them to cross-reference this particular rule to allow its provisions to be used. The Air Quality Committee directed the division to amend the RIA to reflect some specific additional uncertainties that you discussed at your last meeting, and return to the committee in July for approval, and also to request a waiver of the EMC's 30-day rule to request to proceed to public comment and hearing on the rule package at the July EMC meeting. The revised RRA was amended in response to your comments and provided back to OSBM. They approved it on June 19th, 2025. So today I am requesting approval to proceed to the EMC, and sorry, direction with this mouse, but to just highlight the uncertainties section where the revisions were incorporated in response to your comments on page 21 in subsection 5E1. There was some uncertainty associated with whether EPA would approve the submission if it is finalized by the commission and commission and on through the process. So we did add qualitative discussion acknowledging that uncertainty as to whether it would be considered consistent with provisions of the Clean Air Act and be approvable into North Carolina State Implementation Plan on page 23 in subsection 5E3 regarding applicants' use of the pre-permitting construction option. We recognized and acknowledged that there is potential for citizen suit by adding qualitative discussion regarding how many applicants might choose to use the pre-permitting provisions, given potential for that third-party suit if indeed there is considered a strong legal argument that the provisions are inconsistent with the Clean Air Act, even if they are approved into North Carolina's state implementation plan. On page 24 in subsection 5E3, regarding applicant use of pre-permitting construction option, we added a little bit about the financial risk to applicants, discussing that if an applicant chooses to begin constructing prior to receipt of a thoroughly reviewed application, such as the potential need to retrofit or take operational limits to comply with emission limits or applicability thresholds may be needed. On page 29 in section 8, in the cost benefit summary, we included and recognized these particular changes in the discussion. Let's see if I can go the right way this time. So with that, the director is recommending that the committee approve the proposed adoption of 15A NCAC 02Q 0114, proposed amendments to 15A NCAC 02Q 0501 and 0507, and the accompanying revised regulatory impact analysis to proceed to the EMC to request approval to proceed to public comment and hearing. If the committee chooses to do that, depending on the pleasure of the commission, here is the schedule under which we would see the rulemaking proceeding. We're here today in July. Without a 30-day waiver, we would be back in September, assuming the committee forwards this to the EMC, chooses to forward this to the EMC, and then back in the fall. And for a public comment period and hearing in March, we would see adoption by the EMC. That should actually say March of 2026. And in April, we would intend to come back to the Rules Review Commission, and then either April or May, make a submittal to EPA. And then the effective date would be tentative based upon EPA's approval as prescribed in the session law. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Burleson? Well, I'll offer a couple of comments, just remind everyone, I think you're aware of this, but we'll mention it again anyway. Ms. Burleson mentioned there may be a question with respect to EPA approval. We won't know that until the rules get there. But before that, we also have the question that Commissioner Smith had raised at least a couple of meetings back. I've forgotten which one it was now, maybe as far back as March, about putting text of a statute into a rule. And that's essentially what we've got here. That has a potential issue at the Rules Review Commission. And our council has been discussing that with them. And do you have anything further to report on that?
No, I submitted a request for pre-review of the new rule 2Q0114 as drafted for the RRC to take a look, and submitted an argument that it does comply with the APA due to the requirements of SIP amendment with the EPA. I have not heard back from them. That is largely my fault in a delay in getting it submitted to the RRC. I have requested that they have a chance to review our submission prior to the September meeting.
All right. Well, since there's really nothing more we're going to be able to do there, and at this point, I would not propose to wait to move this to the commission until September. I think we need to get these on. They've been delayed longer than they should have been at this point. So that's why we've got the 30-day waiver indicated here. And I've talked to Chair Solomon about that, and it is on the agenda, at least tentatively, for tomorrow. So that's at least the current planning, and I'm glad you put both schedules in here. That's good, with and without the waiver. I guess I'll ask if there are any further questions or discussion.
I'll just say I appreciate the staff's work in adding the additional discussion of the uncertainties around the rule. I think that is very helpful. Thank you.
No, and I think as well that you raised those questions in May, and we got that out, and it's fully. I think we've got a full explanation here, and so I think it's definitely time to proceed with these rules. So, if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve these rules to go to the commission tomorrow.
Motion, correct, Commissioner Wright.
Commissioner Wright moves to,
Point of order, I think we need to make the motion on this, and then we can decide tomorrow whether to grant the waiver or not.
yeah, no,
I
no,
don't
this is
think this
not, this is
binds us
not a
to a
motion.
waiver.
Whoa, whoa. The waiver, if you'll look at the agenda, is mentioned as an issue for the commission. This is not a motion on the waiver. It's a motion strictly to move the rules to the commission, period.
Okay. Can you put the motion back up there, if you will?
I think his concern is with language for EMC tomorrow, just in case they choose not to do the 30-day tomorrow.
Well, but we're gonna,
So that it would just be to approve it to go to the EMC.
That's what this is for today.
all right. I mean, are you concerned about the fact that mentions tomorrow in there?
Yes. Because I don't think the committee should bind in this motion. The motion just clears the committee to be considered, and the EMC
Well-
they can take the waiver or not, or they can vote it
Well,
up
of
or
course,
down.
but the rules are gonna be there and the waiver is gonna be there. I don't care if you want to strike that word out, but I don't think it's terribly relevant, quite honestly. That's where we're going with it. If the committee approves the rules, and we're going there tomorrow, and you obviously have to take up the waiver first. And if the commission does not grant the waiver, then you won't be considering the rule anyway, even though it will be on the agenda otherwise.
Okay.
So I think best practice would be to read the motion as is on the slide, because it's the EMC, the full commission's decision whether to take up the matter tomorrow.
Correct.
So Commissioner Wright, if you were going to make the motion.
Yeah. So we have the motion from Commissioner Wright. Do I have a second?
Could we articulate the motion a little more thoroughly for the record?
Read them.
I guess if you want to read that back, I guess.
I'll paraphrase. I'll make the motion to take this to the full commission tomorrow for consideration at that time of with or without the 30-day waiver.
Well, if there's no 30-day waiver, we wouldn't consider it anyway. I think the language we got right there is what we need. Is there a concern?
No, the language
Jared, if
on
you
this
could just
slide
pick
is
it up
perfect.
after committee and say approve and the rest of it, I think you got it.
Commissioner Wright makes a motion to approve the proposed adoption of 15A NCAC 02Q.0114, proposed amendments to 15A NCAC 02Q.0501 and 0507, and the accompanying regulatory impact analysis to proceed to the EMC to request approval to proceed to public comment and hearing.
Great.
Second.
All right. I have a second. All right. And the chair is satisfied. He's good. All right.
Good. That's the record straight.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed?
I oppose the motion.
I also oppose the motion.
Well, then I guess I'll break the tie because I think we should move to the commission. And you can, if you want to discuss your opposition today, or we'll do it tomorrow, I guess on the waiver, it's up to you.
I will say that I appreciate the staff's work between the May meeting and now to, I think, establish some transparency around the potential effects of this rule, which I don't think were apparent prior to that time. And personally, I'm not, I am not comfortable with the EMC putting forward a rule that we know has so many potential obstacles. So that practice seems, it seems foreign to me. And so those are some of my concerns, Chairman Carter.
Well, I don't disagree with sort of your general statement, but the situation here is, I'd say, slightly different because we have a very explicit mandate from the General Assembly. I don't think we have a choice. We've got to put something forward. Now, will it get approved all the way through the process through RRC and DEQ? EPA, that's a whole different question. But as far as our action, like I said, I don't think we really got a choice here. So, but that's fine. I understand your point. Anything else on this then we will proceed on the agenda. Thank you, Ms. Burleson. Whoop.
Thank you.
Just
Mr.
a point
Chair,
of order
hold on.
clarification. I think I would announce that nobody's changed their vote and it's a 3-2 motion.
Okay, I'm sorry.
carries.
Yes, the vote was 3-2 in favor of proceeding with the rule.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess there's really no signature. Okay, there's nothing there. So we're just going to the concepts now.
Yes, sir.
All right, then Mr. Nelson is going to present the concept of the Title V exclusionary rule for non-emergency stationary reciprocating internal combustion engines.
Okay. Morning. I'm here to present the exclusionary concept for reciprocating internal combustion engines. It's just a list of some acronyms that you may see in this presentation. Just to kind of give you some background, the statutes have sets of rules. The 0800 are what we call exclusionary rules that if, that establishes for facilities, if they're below the thresholds of a major source, the 100 tons per year of regulated pollutants, 10 tons per year of HAP, or 25 tons per year combined, excluded, I guess, from having to get a Title V permit. And then we have a set of rules, which there are 900 rules, or which are permit exemptions that also limits, the need for receiving a construction or operation permit, as long as they meet the criteria of the 900 rule. This particular rule, we have a rule 0903, which excludes emergency generators and stationary reciprocating internal combustion engines or non-emergency engines from obtaining a permit or receiving a permanent exemption if they are below the major source criteria. But they still need to follow the other rules listed below. At issue is that the emergency engines are excluded in the 807 rule, but the non-emergency engines are not. So technically in the 903 rule, we shouldn't be able to exempt the non-emergency engines because they're not included in 807. So what we're trying to do, I guess, is just to kind of close that loophole or that issue, I guess, a technical issue. So what we're proposing, I guess, to amend the 800 rules to include non-emergency stationary RICE. And it may include, amending 807, or we haven't quite decided the approach we're going to take to just buttoning this up. The exemption will be based on potential emissions, just like they are using fuel consumption, which is what 807 currently uses. And it just requires an annual submittal of their fuel consumption for that year to show that they were under those consumption limits. presenting the concept here in July. We're planning on presenting some draft rules to the AQC in September and then move forward from there. Does anybody have any questions?
Commissioner Ellison.
So what is there a requirement from EPA to do this, or you just caught something you're trying to clean up?
This is something that some of the regional offices pointed out that, that may be an issue, I guess, if somebody went and looked at these closely, I guess, or, you shouldn't be able to exclude permitting in 900s if you're not excluded from a Title V permit in the 800.
Okay, I'm cogitating on this.
Well, let me follow then. Does that mean that you're actually doing it even though the rule doesn't explicitly authorize it? That is excluding it from permitting?
I mean,
Yeah. I'm just trying to understand the practice now.
Sorry,
which
yeah,
I
I
may have
just-
misinterpreted something that was said there. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, so we have the 800 rules, which allow you to redefine your potential to emit
Right.
based on actual emissions versus potential emissions.
Okay.
So for engines, for example, you can use your actual hours of operation versus basing it off of 8,760 hours per year.
Right.
So that allows those categories of engines to avoid Title V permitting by redefining their potential to emit. Then you go to the 900 exemption rules, which allows categorically for engines when it's the only source at a facility to be completely exempt from permitting altogether.
Okay.
So that would get them out of any small or synthetic minor permit that may apply. Well, sorry, just small. Because they're redefining their potential to emit as their actual emissions are less than major source thresholds. So it's really just a technicality. We're trying to catch up because we have a 900 exemption rule that says all stationary rice, regardless of whether you're emergency or non-emergency, can be permit exempt. But we don't have an exclusionary rule under the 800 provisions for non-emergency engines. We do have exclusionary rules for emergency engines and peak shaving engines.
Okay. So this basically you're just adding this third category to the existing set of
Correct.
exemptions.
Just to clean it up and make sure that we're also allowing those non-emergency engines to use the benefit of the exclusionary rule and the exemption rule to get out of permitting when that's the only source at a facility.
What happens if the committee and the commission do not indulge you in this pursuit of another rule?
So we would have a kind of an issue with our rules then. We'd have to go fix the 900 rule because that allows all stationary engines to be exempt from permitting.
Okay, and what's so bad about that?
Because there's not an allowance for them to redefine their potential to emit.
Okay, so if we do go forward with this, who specifically, what types of people, businesses, entities would be affected?
Yeah, so it could be facilities that have non-emergency engines. That's the only emission source at that facility, where their actual emissions are below Title V major thresholds. And that's the only source at the facility. So what we're trying to do is allow them to take advantage of being allowed to get out of permitting based on redefining their actual emissions or their potential emissions based on actual, rather than saying we have to calculate their potential to emit based on 8,760 hours per year.
And what would be the burden on these entities?
They would have to get a permit.
They would have to get a permit. So you're going to change the rule and make more people have to get permits?
No, the rule is to get them out of a permit.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to clarify.
Yeah.
Because I'm not especially familiar
Yeah.
familiar with these rules, and I'm
Mhm.
trying to see how this makes sense.
Yeah, we're trying to get facilities that only have non-emergency engines out of having to get a Title V permit and out of any type of permit.
And so what reporting will they be required to do?
They just have to monitor their actual fuel usage and make sure that it's below the limits in the exclusionary rule to be exempt.
And they self-report that to DEQ?
They just have to maintain records on site.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I think some examples would be good when they come back to the commission. I've dealt with this in several places, New Orleans being one of them, where 2 megawatt emergency generators were being brought in, like 100 of them. And they said no permit was needed because they were emergency, and there is an argument for that. But when they looked at the hours these things actually run, the amount of fuel they consume, they could have got caught in the back end trap if you should have had them Title V permitted or as a synthetic. I don't know if that's the same case, but once you see this play out, like in an emergency situation where people are redesigning things and say, just because it's emergency, I don't need a permit. It really helps to have that defined up front so that you don't get people caught in a trap of, do I have to get a permit or not, when they're trying to put or redesign emergency stuff. So I may be way off base, but it reminds me of that. And I think examples would probably help the committee from North Carolina to help people consider what we're talking about here.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Smith.
so let me see if I've got this straight. So it sounds like the change wouldn't actually affect emergency engines. Those are already covered.
Already covered.
Both
Correct.
rules. And the conflict we potentially have is that the 0900 rules exempt entirely some non-emergency engines that if we don't do something that requires them to do this demonstration under 0800, they may be in violation of Title V.
Correct.
That's right.
So that's what we're trying to fix, is we're trying to eliminate a situation where some non-emergency engines think they can claim an exemption without demonstrating that they're actually below the Title V thresholds.
That is correct.
Well,
Thank you.
and I think you're right, but I do think there's some people that say just because something's considered an emergency generator by classification, they think they're automatically classified. So I don't know if this relieves that or not, but
Yeah,
we need examples to help us see this.
Thank you.
Happy to do so. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions or discussions? All right, then, want to do your overview then? We'll move on to the director's overview of what's going on at EPA, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Just the wheel to change.
The wheel and not the arrows.
Yeah. This doesn't seem.
No, all right, got it. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to all committee members. Again, Mike Brzezinskis, Director, Division of Air Quality, here to give an update on EPA and federal air regulatory announcements. This is a bit of a newsy type of presentation. In fact, many of these slides, I'd say 90% of the information in these slides was generated in April. Very little has changed since then. But this is our first opportunity to update the committee on these things and provide you with some additional insights of things that have occurred over the course of 2025, and especially in the last couple of weeks. Okay, so starting off at the top at EPA, y'all know that Lee Zeldin was sworn in as EPA Administrator, confirmed by the Senate in January. There are other principal deputy assistants and assistant administrators that have started to go through the confirmation process. Most important to Air is Aaron Zabo. He is nominated as the assistant administrator of Office of Air and Radiation. He went through an initial confirmation hearing, but he's waiting actual confirmation and actual confirmation vote, which has not yet been scheduled. So he's currently serving as senior advisor to the administrator, until which time he is confirmed as the assistant administrator of Air.
Just anything you can provide on his background or prior EPA experience or whatever? I don't remember that name.
He does have a little bit of prior EPA experience, and I'm drawing a blank on which office. It was not the Office of Air and Radiation, but I can follow up with you and get you that specific information later. Also, regionally here in Region 4 in the Southeast, Kevin McGomber has been appointed as the Region 4 Administrator. He has 4 decades of experience in environmental planning, water resources, stormwater management, and sustainable urban development. Now, shortly after Administrator Zeldin was confirmed, he unveiled a new initiative entitled Powering the Great American Comeback. And with his initiative, he announced 5 pillars for EPA. First was clean air, land, and water for every American. Second was restore energy, American energy dominance. Third was permitting reform, cooperative federalism, cross-agency partnerships. Fourth was make the U.S. the AI capital of the world. And fifth was protecting and bringing back American auto jobs. Now, Administrator Zeldin's initiative and his 5 pillars were designed to align with a number of executive orders coming from the White House, including a rescission of prior executive orders, mainly some of those that were issued in 2024, a regulatory freeze, which included withdrawal of rules that were sitting at OMB during the transition, not to propose any new rules in that time window, postpone effective dates and comment deadlines for some of those that were caught in limbo during the transition, and EPA staff were directed to not communicate outside the agency on those actions. There are other executive orders listed here, and you all can kind of do some your own research and Googling on some of those. But I will say that across all of the executive orders that have come across thus far, not a lot of them have immediate legal impacts to the work that we do day in and day out in the Division of Air Quality. However, after the initiative, the pillars that aligned with the executive orders came from Administrator Zeldin, an announcement of 31 deregulatory actions that he announced on March 12th. And so that's really the meat of my presentation here today, is to walk through all of those. And I've kind of highlighted an asterisk, and I'll annotate along the way here. I've highlighted in yellow the items that have impacts to North Carolina, and then I've also included in red text ones where the Division of Air Quality has deadlines relative to the prior federal rule that is now being reconsidered or revisited. So let's work through these. The first grouping was under kind of the subcategory titled by EPA as of energy related, and that included a reconsideration of the greenhouse gas regulations on power plants. Now, a little asterisk here, EPA recently proposed repeal of those Biden-era regulations, and a comment period on that proposal ends on August 7th. The next item on the list, reconsideration of oil and gas regulations. Now that, I didn't have time to put an asterisk by that one, but some late breaking news, that rule set is sitting at OMB. And so what reconsideration means, we will find out soon. I'll talk about that in just a moment about what some of those potential outcomes could be. The third one on the list, reconsideration of the recently tightened mercury and air toxics standards, or MATS rule. Again, 2 asterisks by that one with a footnote where EPA proposed repeal of certain amendments from the 2024 version of that final rule, and the comment period ends on that proposal on August 11th. Next is reconsideration of the GHG reporting program, reconsideration of the 2024 risk management program rules under Section 112R of the Clean Air Act, and then reconsideration of power plant effluent and limitation guidelines, and reconsideration of oil and gas ELGs. I didn't highlight those, obviously, because those are not impacts to DAQ. But the ones I highlighted in red up at the top there in the red text are items where the prior final rule puts the agency on a deadline to develop a state plan. You heard us present the concept for that very first one on the list here back in January. We've since paused that work. Likewise for the second item on the list highlighted in red text, or we've paused work on that given these reconsideration actions at EPA. Okay, So the next category, subcategory by EPA of the deregulatory agenda was under cost of living. And so that begins with a reconsideration of the vehicle greenhouse gas rules, where EPA is going to reconsider the light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicle emission standards for model years 2027 and beyond, as well as reopen the GHG Phase 3 standard and the heavy-duty NOx rule. So that's all wrapped up in that first bullet. The second bullet, reconsideration of 2009 endangerment finding for regulation of greenhouse gases and related rules. That's a pretty big item on this list. Keep in mind that that endangerment finding was really the foundational piece that declared GHGs endangered both public health and the environment, and was critical for the following regulation of GHGs as air pollution, and really the legal foundation for various climate policies, including the vehicle emission standards at EPA at the federal level. So don't know exactly where that one's going, but that is certainly one to highlight here on the list. Third on the list is a reconsideration of technology transition rules. These are refrigeration rules, for example, that are not delegated to the state, but that authority is retained by EPA. And then the final one on this slide is a revisiting of the fine particulate or PM2.5 National Ambient Air Quality Standard. You'll note that there's a different term here for the first time on this list, and that is revisiting rather than reconsideration. So those in the air quality regulatory community are trying to figure out, well, why a different term here? And so I'll share with you some of the insights and the thinkings of those amongst at least state and local air quality regulators across the U.S. And the thought there is that EPA may take a pathway of considering the prior reconsideration of the PM2.5 NAAQS as having been done illegally, in that EPA did not follow the Clean Air Act process for reviewing a national ambient air quality standard when they moved the annual standard from 12 micrograms to 9 micrograms. And obviously there's a significant body of work and a record created about what some of the costs and significant benefits are from moving that standard from 12 to 9. And so it's the thinking is the revisiting is more of a signal of the angle that EPA is going to take, which is a legal challenge to that standard being moved the way that it had. We'll find out for sure. Don't take that what I just said to the bank, but I'm just sharing a little bit of insights amongst our colleagues across the U.S. Okay, next on the cost of living subcategory as a reconsideration of a number of national emission standards for hazardous air pollutants, or NESHAPs. And so there's a number of sub-bullets here for different source categories. I've highlighted the ones that impact us here in North Carolina in yellow, and then put in parentheses at the beginning of the sub-bullet the number of facilities that are subject to those federal regulations. So you can see on this list, we're not significantly impacted in the grand scheme of things. But again, we don't know anything more than what's on this slide with regard to the reconsideration of these NESHAPs. Okay, also continuing under the cost of living subcategory of the EPA's deregulatory agenda is they've committed to evaluate many other national emission standards for hazardous air pollutants, or NESHAPs, and new source performance standards, or NSPSs. Restructuring of the regional haze program. We've actually been a little bit in the loop and providing some constructive feedback to EPA on that particular item for a number of years now. So we're hopeful that we'll be having a seat at the table in whatever that restructuring of that program looks like. Also on the list is overhauling of social cost of carbon, redirecting enforcement resources to revise the National Enforcement Compliance Initiative, and terminating federal environmental justice programs. Next on the list, under the subcategory of cooperative federalism, was an announcement of ending the Good Neighbor Plan. This is the ozone transport issue or federal implementation plan that North Carolina proudly is not subject to. So that is not highlighted in yellow, but certainly a significant item for many other states around us, mainly to the north and northwest of us. Next on the list is resolving the state implementation plan or SIP backlog that exists in each of the EPA regional offices. For North Carolina, that is not a major issue at all, but just it is on their list to prioritize. Next was improve exceptional events rule to allow prescribed fires. This one was a little bit of a head scratcher for us, given that the exceptional events rule already allows the consideration of prescribed fires. I think the thought here is that it would be an action to make it more explicit or clear, or maybe lower the hurdles for demonstrating impacts from prescribed fires. Next on the list is reconstitute EPA's SAB and KSAC. Late breaking news. I just saw an announcement yesterday online where the nominees are posted for those boards and committees. Update the coal ash regulations, enforcement discretion for North Carolina Hurricane Helene recovery. So that was a unique one on the list and very specific and narrow in its scope. And that is the exact topic that we have updated you on for a number of meetings since Hurricane Helene hit North Carolina. And Deputy Director Hartsfield will be giving her remarks and more specific remarks on that item in just a moment when I finish. And then the final one under cooperative federalism was a reassessment of 40 CFR Part 60 subpart BA. These are the regulations that apply to the state when we have to develop a state plan, say in response to, for example, those GHG emission standards for electric generating units. Subpart BA tells us, well, what's our timeline for developing that plan with you, and what are the things that we need to consider in that plan. So that is on the list to be reassessed. Okay, so there are a lot of questions here, right, about what or how this might all evolve, and that centers on the use of the term reconsider or reconsideration on many of these, revisit in some other instances, and reassess in other instances. So could this mean a full repeal and replace following the Federal Administrative Procedures Act? Well, yes, it absolutely could. And it appears that they're proceeding down that road for both the GHG standards and the MATS rule. Following the Administrative Procedures Act obviously is the most durable pathway for many of these reconsiderations, but it takes time. Could the reconsider mean that there's some targeted or surgical amendments to certain regulations following the Administrative Procedures Act? Yes, that's also possible. Could reconsider mean that some of these are simply reviewed and then delayed or upheld? That's possible. What I think is also possible is judicial review is possible under all of these scenarios and all of these items. So I think there's going to be many meetings where we're discussing and giving updates on any one of these as time moves on. We're paying very close attention again to those terms when they're used, something different than reconsideration is used. All right, so the bottom half of the slide here highlights an action from the White House where there's a presidential memo issued on April 9th directing the repeal of unlawful regulations as determined by the administration under recent high court rulings. The memo urges federal agencies to bypass the Administrative Procedure Act's typical notice and comment requirements relying on the APA's good cause exception, which allows agencies to promulgate or roll back rules if the agency for good cause finds that notice and comment would be impractical, unnecessary, or contrary to the public interest. However, I'll note that on May 2nd, so about a month after that came out, Aaron Szabo, the nominee for Assistant Administrator for Air and Radiation, stated that the agency is committed to following the Administrative Procedures Act and avoiding any procedural errors for all actions. Okay, a little bit more. There are also announced the use of a sparsely used provision in the Clean Air Act that allows the consideration of some compliance extensions or exemptions. This is under Clean Air Act Section 112I4. And so under that, facilities were notified of an opportunity to request exceptions in late March. States were not notified directly. We were finding that out through actually news reports that these exemptions could be applied for by sources that we regulate and permit and inspect in North Carolina. So it is our understanding and EPA staff's understanding that only one group and one source category of exceptions have been acted on thus far. And those were certain facilities subject to the Mercury and Air Toxics Rule, or MATS rule, where on April 8th, the White House announced that 47 coal-fired power plants across the U.S. would receive a 2-year compliance extension, or essentially an exemption from the rules for the time period noted there. But the important part of this slide is that none of those facilities are in North Carolina. Okay, so this is my favorite slide. So when 2025 started, we fully anticipated, due to the federal transition, there would be some regulatory whiplash at the federal level. It was very predictable. This has happened before, it has happened now, and it will happen again. And so I'm hopeful that states have a role to be a partner in this process as EPA reviews, revisits, reconsiders matters on the list here. Interestingly, there's not been a universal industry response or manufacturing response to a lot of these items on this list. So transitioning off of the regulatory actions and onto other pieces of the federal picture, one thing we did not anticipate when the year began was finding ourselves in a situation of reacting to our federal grant money being frozen or now potentially significantly cut or eliminated. So for the Division of Air Quality here in North Carolina, 12% of our overall budget comes from 2 recurring Clean Air Act grants authorized under the Clean Air Act. So there's a lot of uncertainty about how much those grant programs are going to produce. So we are working with our national media-specific organizations, Air, Water, Waste, and the Environmental Council of States, to make sure Congress understands that state and locals implement 90% of the environmental rules and laws and programs out there, and federal funding to support our agencies and programs has to keep pace with inflation and the rising cost of meeting our obligations during a period of proposed energy expansion in the U.S. You may have seen the news that some of the proposed cuts to EPA's budget suggested by the White House, which if enacted in federal fiscal year 26 would significantly impact state and local air agencies, including our 2 Clean Air Act recurring grants. How this goes is going to be uncertain, but I want to raise it here today as a significant potential issue for us moving forward. For state and local air agencies in the southeastern U.S., these state and local air quality management grants fund between 11.5% and 50% of the total programs in state and local programs in the Southeast. Some of those agencies that are at the higher end of that spectrum are going to have to consider returning some elements of the program implementation back to EPA, including but not limited to ambient monitoring, implementation of some federal regulations, and permitting and compliance activities, if the White House budget is followed by Congress. So long way to go on that. It'll be an interesting month or 2 of committees in Congress, appropriations committees meetings in Congress, to see how this goes. Communications are key. And those communications are occurring through our Secretary's office to our delegation in North Carolina. So that is all I have for you this morning. The crystal ball is most certainly cloudy, but we'll continue to give y'all updates as things impact our division as EPA continues to roll out a number of proposals here for the remainder of the year. Glad to take any questions for you.
Any questions? All right.
I have one question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Smith.
That's fine. I know you don't have a crystal ball, notwithstanding the final slide. But on the greenhouse gas endangerment funding, just want to confirm I'm remembering this correctly. The endangerment funding was litigated. And if I recall correctly, the United States Supreme Court upheld the endangerment funding as being consistent with the Clean Air Act. So we're at a point now where there shouldn't be a legal challenge to the greenhouse gas endangerment finding, and anything to reconsider that finding would have to be technical and scientific in nature. They would have to actually make findings in opposition to those that supported the greenhouse gas endangerment finding to begin with. Is that correct?
I think so. I think it's ultimately a heavy lift for all the reasons you mentioned, but I think it was maybe the sequence was reversed slightly. I think it was a 2007 Supreme Court decision that established that GHGs are air pollutants, and then the endangerment finding followed in 2009, I believe. But regardless, yes, you're correct. There were both of those things occurred.
And just one other comment, the apparent enthusiasm for toxic air pollutants is notable in the list of things that will be reconsidered, which is unfortunate. And there are also some areas where, particularly with respect to toxic air pollutants like mercury, where it will be interesting to see how what happens at the federal level matches up to what we've done at the state level, because North Carolina did get out ahead on a number of issues, including mercury. I hope that's where we stay.
Yes, ma'am. And I think by, the next time we meet, we'll have a much better analysis of the impacts of at least the two proposals that are already out there today. We're reviewing those currently. But for that mercury and air toxics rules, we were already very well positioned in North Carolina. Regardless of that rule, there was very little that needed to occur as a result of that rule to comply. But we're still analyzing all of this, and we can remark on that further at a subsequent meeting.
Well, let me just add, I believe the director correctly identified that the 2007 decision was on whether or not carbon dioxide was regulable as a pollutant under the Clean Air. I don't know that the follow-on endangerment finding ever got to the Supreme Court, though. I'm not sure about that.
No, you're correct. And so I think the point I was trying to make is that the legal authority to regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act has been established in the Supreme Court. When you get to the endangerment finding, that's a technical decision, essentially, that has to be backed up by the science and technology to show that that particular air pollutant, in fact, endangers public health and welfare. And so, but that would require the current EPA to lay out the case for reversing the conclusion of the earlier endangerment finding.
They'll have to go, I'm confident they'd have to go through a full rulemaking process, public comment hearing, if that's where they're going on this. I know that they've indicated they're at least going to revisit it, but we'll see what happens. We're running right up against time. Mr. Chair.
I just want to thank you for your many years of service on more things than air quality. But as we sit here, chairing this, maybe your last meeting here as chairman committee, but just thank you over the years for all you've done and all you contributed. I think I can't overstate the knowledge you've brought on the area issues and the loss it'll be to have you gone from the commission perhaps. But I just want to thank you again, whether you've been the chair, the vice chair, or just a member. You've done a great job for us. You've been somebody we didn't all have to agree with you sometimes, but we could all trust what you said on air quality, and it's much appreciated.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I actually was going to ask you a question anyway, which is, as I said, we're running dead on time here. And we had another presentation, but it involves Helene's situation. What I was going to ask is if there's any way we could slide that to tomorrow so it would be presented for the whole commission rather than taking up time now and backing off the next committee meeting.
Yeah, let's stay on schedule. We can look at that for tomorrow.
Is it? Okay, yeah, we'll take care of it tomorrow then. Very good.
Very good, thank you.
Well, in that event, unless anybody has any further business questions and so on, I'm going to adjourn the committee meeting for the last time. Thank you very much. And I guess the next committee meeting will start in about 15 minutes at 10:45. That's groundwater.
Groundwater and
waste management. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, let's move this.